Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be setting the valve lash on this Slant 6. Let's get to it. The valve lash on these is the distance between the rocker arm and the top of the valve. So there's a little bit of a gap there, and you want enough gap that it's not holding the valve open, but you don't want it flopping around and sloppy. If it's sloppy, some of the lift of the cam is going in to take out that slop. Hydraulic lifters on newer vehicles take care of this, but the Slant 6 was adjustable solid lifter for a long time. Because metal expands when it gets hot, you have to check the valve lash when it's hot. So we have to actually start it up, get the engine hot, but we have to take the valve cover off in order to check the lash. When we start this up, it tends to fling oil around, so it makes a pretty good mess. In fact, you can kind of see there's oil down here from when I just started it up. So it's a good idea to take the valve cover and at least set it on top of there so that it can keep some of that splashing inside the engine. And that way you can just pull it off once it comes up to idle and up to temp. To keep it from falling off just from vibrating, I'm going to put a couple of bolts in there just to hold it in place. There we go. Now we just start it up and bring it up to temp. Alright, we ran it for a while, brought it up to temperature. Now we can take the valve cover off and check the lash. The lash on these, the exhaust needs to be at 20 thousandths and the intake should be at about 10 thousandths. So we're going to need some feeler gauges for this. To turn this over, I'm going to use the starter, but we don't want it to actually start. So I'm just going to pull the coil wire off the coil down here. I had the timing light hooked up. So I've removed the coil wire so now it can't start. The general theory here is we want to check the lash when both the valves are completely closed. We know that it's completely closed when it is in the power stroke, so right after combustion and the piston is moving down. So what we want to do is we want to rotate it so that we know that the piston is moving down. When the engine is rotating on a 4-stroke, what you're going to get is you're going to get exhaust, intake, compression, power. So if you watch it while it's turning over, you'll see exhaust, intake, then there's a pause, exhaust, intake. So take a look at this one right here. Exhaust in, exhaust in, exhaust in, exhaust in. Right after that intake closes, you know it's going into the power stroke and both valves are closed. So that's when you'd want to measure. Another way you can adjust these is with it running. It's much easier that way. You can just check the lash as you go. The challenge there is it makes a bit of a mess, and this car is really loud and you wouldn't be able to hear me explaining anything. Once the motor is rotated where the valves are closed, both of the rocker arms should be able to move. These ones, I can feel them rocking a whole lot. So they definitely need to be adjusted. On the front 3 cylinders, the exhaust is that way. On the back 3, the exhaust is that way. So we'll start with the exhaust on this one. We'll take our feeler gauge, 020, and we're going to put it between the end of the rocker arm and the valve, and we'll slowly tighten this screw down until it starts to provide friction and it's difficult to slide that feeler gauge in and out. So when it starts providing some friction on the feeler gauge, then we know we're set. And now we'll do the intake on this one, and we'll set that to 10. Now we'll bump the starter and rotate it over a little bit. Once you have the lash adjusted on all of them, go ahead and put the valve cover back on Make sure you clean that gasket surface. It'll almost always have some oil on it, so clean it off with a rag, put it back together, and go ahead and drive it. That's all there is to it. Thanks for watching.